Good evening. The hour being 6 o'clock, we are called to order. Please be courteous, turn off your cell phones, watches, and other noisemakers, including me, myself. A reminder that the City Council may discuss or take action on any or all of the items listed on the agenda, irrespective of how the items are described, and no new items will begin after 9 p.m. unless a majority of the members present vote to allow the items to be heard. Please rise as you are able and join us to the Pledge of Allegiance to our country. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The clerk would please call the roll.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas.
Here.
Vice Mayor Gurney.
Present.
Councilmember Wellander.
Here.
Councilmember Dean.
Here.
Mayor Lowe.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are doing public participation using Zoom and also in person. And we did have a closed session, but no action to be reported. May I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Oh, thank you. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, if the clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas.
Present.
Vice Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Councilmember Dean.
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye. Would you like to change your present vote to a yes?
Presently, yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
All right. Good to know. All right. At this point, we invite members of the public to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. And it's recommended that we keep the comments to 3 minutes or less. And if it's something that's already on the agenda, I'll just kind of remind you, hey, we're going to be discussing that at item number something or other, and invite you to come back. So at this time, are there members of the public who wish to make a comment?
It's been a while. Robert Demler, 1st Street West, Sonoma. If it's appropriate, I'm not sure, I would respectfully suggest that the city send a letter to the Board of Supervisors expressing our displeasure of their loose handling of the deadlines that got us to the 900 housing units at the SDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demler. Any other comments from the public? Do we have any on Zoom? We have none on Zoom. All right, moving on. Does anyone have a dedication for this meeting? Seeing none, we will move on to the council members' reports and comments. And this time, I'm going to start with Mr. Wellander.
I'm happy to report I have no comments.
No comments from Mr. Wellander. Vice Mayor Gurney.
I always have plenty of comments, but I think I'll just report the relevant things. I had occasion to meet with Sonoma Splash and have a conversation about the success of the partnership with the pool at the high school, and it's very successful. And as a swimmer, I love that pool. I had a meeting on the 13th of September with Supervisor Gurney. And this is the Shared Services Committee, if you will. And we're working through a process to hopefully obtain some data and input from the community at large using, I believe what we're referring to as a wellness survey at this point. And so that is moving along and meeting regular. I also attended a meeting of the Catalyst Fund and talked about the food scarcity issue that they're working on and the types of programs that they hope to implement and support with the funding that they happen to be in possession of. And almost last, let's see, the Tourism Improvement District meeting met on the 14th, and we continue to take a look at the benefits of visitors and how we can attract them during the off-season. And we also went through and identified a number of organizations that put on various events that attract tourists and certainly the local community, such as the Vintage Festival and so forth. But they provided grant funding, made some decisions around supporting some of those organizations that put on events that benefit the community. And last but not least, the city had a work day out at Valley Cemetery for volunteers to come out and help clean up the cemetery. And there were several of us in this room that were there, and I can't tell you what a delight it was. If you've never raked for 4 hours, you need to join us one weekend. So things are shaping up, so to speak. Otherwise, that concludes my report.
Thank you so much. Ms. Farrar-Rivas?
Yes. So on behalf of Mayor Lowe, I attended the Policy Committee tour of State Highway 37, and that was on August 23rd. And so there was a number of entities there, representatives from Napa, Solano, Marin, Sonoma County, and also, of course, the transportation department was there. So I'll go right to the gist of what we can know now. There's a lot of information. We basically went down Highway 37, stopped at all the different bridges primarily. And I think all of us are aware here the two key issues with 37. Number one is traffic congestion, especially those traveling from going west to east in the afternoon and the backup there. And the other issue that they're trying to deal with on 37 is that it already floods, and as with the rising ocean levels, it's going to continue to flood even more. And so there's a number of projects. There was folks there from restoration organizations of what they're going to do to help restore some of the marshes, which also helps hold back some of the water. But a lot of work being done by a lot of people. There'll be two plans. There'll be a segment A and a segment B. Segment B is going to be completed a long time from now. I wouldn't even guess to give a date on that. But segment A, what they've said, because I think one of the things that will happen in segment A that I think is a good thing for us is that when you're going off Highway 37 to turn towards Sears Point, and you don't get to your turnoff point until it's, I don't know, maybe 4 blocks or whatever before you're about to turn. That whole turning lane is supposed to be extended. So if you're someone going to Sonoma, that could be very beneficial to all of us, that you're not having to stand in line as long to get to where you can start turning, and will help the flow of traffic. But so they've completed the environmental review of the work that we'll be doing for the first part of this work. They're going to be doing design from 2023 to 2025 and construction from 2025 to 2027. So, but there's a lot of detail that if I started to get into it, everybody's eyes would completely glaze over. So hopefully I hit the high points. And then I attended the Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commission meeting, and that was on September 23rd, too. Interesting. I mean, that was a busy day. So Supervisor Susan Gorin came to the meeting to, I always try to explain to folks what this committee is for. So the Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commission, of which we are looking for 2 members from the city of Sonoma to partake in, is it's designed to look at major issues, primarily land issues, issues that are crossover between Sonoma Valley and the city of Sonoma. So the issues come to the commission makes recommendations. Some of those recommendations go to Permit Sonoma, which is the planning department for the county, and some of those recommendations would go to our planning commission. And so there's representatives, I sit on that for the city, we have a representative from our planning commission on that as well too. And so what we're doing in the process right now is kind of re-looking at what the whole goal of the commission was and what the overall breadth of that commission will be going forward. And it's a very interesting commission, talks about a lot of interesting issues, and if you are interested in those type of opportunities, please, you can go to our site, our city site, Rebecca. I think I saw it there, and there's an application there for you. And then, last but not least, sorry, I think there's one more that I did. Oh, yes, and then, actually, David, John, and I, the three of us, City Manager Guin and Councilperson Gurney and myself attended a salon and that happened at our golf club, and just there was a number of, we presented to, I think it was about 50 women, maybe a little bit less, but just kind of like what are the main issues that are happening in the city of Sonoma, and what are their concerns. And that was, I think that was in October, 7th of October. So there we go, maybe earlier. That's it.
Thank you.
That's all I remember.
That's quite a lot. Thank you so much for all that. Yes, Mr. Ding.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. August 17, I attend Sonoma County Waste Management Agency. And that is a brand name so-called Zero Waste Sonoma. It was my first time to attend this meeting to replace our former council member, Agramonte. He's here. It's big responsibility because I represent the city and take care of all waste materials and the policy and outreaching and education. So during that meeting, and we listened a report from the staff because this agency wanted to acquire a facility in the Windsor city because for the pricing, for the sales terms, and the back and forth already and half a year in the past. So we suggest we need another push and a little bit and let them move forward because right now it's a good timing to purchase a property. And also during that meeting, we also approved the budget 2022 and 2023. And basically, our next meeting should be in October. The second thing I would like to share with you that is related with the minor representation for the Sonoma Valley Groundwater and Sustainability Agency. And the last week, we received the great news. The State Department and the Water Resource approved $3.097 and the dollars to the grants money for our Sonoma Valley. It has been expecting for a while, so finally we got approved. So it reminds me at the beginning when we wanted to become very active and the representative in this location of this organization. And I suggest we donate voluntarily $25,000 for them to work hard for this grants. That right now, and finally got approved. Just give you the reference number. Total grants for the whole state is $187 million. So basically, our small Sonoma Valley got 1.6%. That is not very, very easy to get this. And Mayor, this is the two things I want to report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As my report, there were many meetings that I attended. I did take a hike up to Jack London above the SDC ropes course to look at the orchard up there, thanks to the Rotary for working on that as well, and got an overview of the work that's going on up there and how we can be helpful to keep that incredible resource going. I know it's not in the city of Sonoma, but it is an absolute treasure in the valley, and we have to preserve it. I received several communications from the sister cities, different sister cities in Penglai and in Kanyev, thanking us for our continued support of the Sister Cities program. I attended the plein air gala and was in fact the guest speaker, and what an incredible event, a week that is, starting with a kickoff with all of the artists, and many of you probably saw them around town painting, and I know I did, and I bought a painting at the end. I'm very, very happy with it, and I'm very happy that the good chunk of that investment will go to the arts program in the schools. And for those of you who don't know, I believe 40%, I think that's right, 40% of all of the money raised from the sale of the art goes to art in the schools, and it's an incredible event. I attended the League for Historic Preservation event. Mr. Demler recruited me to say a few words, and thank you for that nice event. Attended the housing symposium in the Springs. There was a legislative meeting with the local League of Cities where we got updated on the final determination of all the bills in Sacramento, and all of us will hear more about that as we go to the League of Cities conference this week. I attended the LAFCO meeting, which was predominantly dealing with some legal issues. We had a kickoff for the Arts Walk. We're bringing back the Arts Walk starting in October, which is great. And I just ask you to look around this room, and you will see the history of the Vintage Festival posters. A big thank you to the staff and to the Cultural and Fine Arts Commission for this incredible presentation in anticipation of our Vintage Festival coming up. These posters have never all been shown in one place, and some of them not at all, and there's some incredible art to be seen here. I am a member of the Sonoma County Transportation Authority, and we have selected a new executive director. Suzanne Smith is retiring, and James Cameron, who is an internal applicant who knows a lot about the area, will be assuming her role. And first thing, he wanted to come out to Sonoma Valley, so he's coming tomorrow. The city manager and I will meet with him, and then I promise to take him on what I call a bumpy road tour of the area. So if there's anyone out there who has a particular street or road that you think we should drive on to bring up the point home that I see some heads nodding. Please don't be shy. I can be reached any number of ways, all on the website, and please tell them you really must go down Riverside Drive. That's a definite, but I could use a few more. And just to let you know, there are two members of the boards of supervisors on the SCTA, but the board of supervisor representing the valley is not, as it so happens. So I feel like it's very important as a member that I speak not just for the streets in the city of Sonoma, but for the streets that get us in and out of the city of Sonoma, which needs some work. Finally, I would like to just do a huge shout out to the city manager who was selected, and there's an event tomorrow, and I know the vice mayor will be attending, not tomorrow, Friday, the vice mayor will be attending. He is an honoree to get the Grable Hedgepeth Housing Champion Award. This is given by Generation Housing, And this is for all of his work as the Assistant City Manager for Santa Rosa during the 2017 fires. His innovative policies and leadership have been instrumental in both disaster recovery and advancing affordable housing solutions. David embodies the spirit of collaboration and strategic thinking that drives meaningful change. And we are so honored that he's our city manager. And congratulations, David, on this incredible award. And I think that does it for me. That was a lot. I didn't give you everything. There's a lot there. If you need to know more, please let me know. So now, the honoree, Mr. City Manager, Mr. Guin, is your turn.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. Just a little follow-up on the posters. I think it's a really interesting display, and I have a little bit more information here I can share for everybody in the room. The festival started in 1897, and it's one of the largest in the States, and the posters represent 40 years of the event. They range from 1984 to 2018. There's a few missing, but this is all that was available. The 1984 poster, which is the top left next to the fire extinguisher on this side, was the first poster made available for purchase. The 2018 poster, which is the bottom right behind me, was designed and printed for the 1969 festival and then reprinted for 2018. So this will be hanging throughout through the end of the year, and there's going to be a reception that's held later in the year to acknowledge these. We'll post that when that time comes. I also wanted to thank, as the Vice Mayor stated, thank the volunteers that showed up on Saturday for our first cemetery cleanup day, first of many. We did Valley Cemetery on Saturday. We had a lot of people out there raking leaves and pruning trees. And so I want to thank everyone that came out there for 4 hours and worked through the morning. And also want to thank staff who helped organize that, Jenny and Chris Pegg and Sarah Tracy, who's put a lot of time and effort in getting everything set up with the equipment and everything ready to go. We do have 2 more coming up. The next one will be on October 7th, Saturday, October 7th, and we'll be focusing on Mountain Cemetery on that day, and so we'll release the times and the details on that as we get a little closer. If you're interested in participating in that, you can go onto our website and sign up for information, put your email address in there, and we'll email you with additional information on when we do volunteer days at the cemeteries. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight one event that I thought was really powerful that came to Sonoma. That not many people knew about, but on Friday, the governor's office hosted a regional hearing for the California Truth and Healing Council in Sonoma at the Mission. It was led by the governor's tribal affairs secretary and included members of the California Native tribes in the area. And the Truth and Healing Council was created by the governor by an executive order, and it's a California Native American-led initiative that aims to clarify the historic record of relationship between the state and the Native Americans by looking through documents and also hearing stories from those that live here. And so the purpose of the council is that they need to submit a final report to the governor's office by 2025, and then that will help make recommendations on how the state wants to move forward with communication and outreach and education on the California Native Americans. So it was a pretty powerful event that was held here, and again, the governor's office was here, the director of state parks was here. A lot of people were in Sonoma for this meeting, and that was a great event that they pulled people here for. So just pass that along, and that's all I have today.
Thank you very much. We now have the city attorney comments. Mr. Ruderman.
Thank you, Mayor Lowe, members of the council. Mayor Lowe kind of mentioned this, just a quick update. The legislature did complete their session of for 2023 on Friday, and those bills now need to be either signed or vetoed by the governor by October 14th. And so at that point, we'll dive into all of the new legislation that we're going to having to deal with, and we can look at that. In addition, with the Cal Cities Conference coming up, just wanted to let the council know that I have been invited to be a member of the Cal Cities Legal Advocacy Committee, which is a group of city attorneys in the state that recommends joining amicus briefs for different lawsuits that are going on in the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court. So that's a big honor for me. It's a really exciting committee, so I'm looking forward to serving on that.
Thank you. That's, good news. We're in good hands. All right, moving on, presentations. I have a brief proclamation for the Sonoma Valley Museum of Art on the occasion of their 25th anniversary. And I've understood that they're not here tonight because this is going to be on the 26th and they're going to actually do something there. So we'll make sure that this gets to them. And it's an important honor. It's an important milestone, 25 years. And as many of you know, I did a kickoff for Meet the Mayor at the Museum of Art, sort of proclaimed that this is going to be a year of the arts, and they've been incredible partners, and it's an amazing museum. They bring in resources that we wouldn't normally have in a small city like this, and it's really something. So and the reason I wanted to do a kickoff there is a lot of people came up to me and said, I've lived here a long time. I haven't been here before. And they wouldn't have, so it's a way to bring people in. So I'm just honored to be able to have this, sign this and bring it over to them. And I don't know if there's any comments from the public on this before we, do we need to approve this presentation? No. Any other comments regarding this before we move on? Any comments? Okay. Well, thank you. We are now at the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted on by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council request specific items to be removed for separate action. So at this point, I'm going to take public comment, and then we'll see if there are any recommendations for any polls. Are there any comments regarding the consent calendar?
Thank you, Mayor Lowe, City Council. I made a vow I was not going to be up here very often because it's pretty annoying when council members come back. Don't mean to say that anybody else, but so I'm here on behalf of Care Partners Initiative, and much I would like to share. Much appreciation goes to the following group of Valley leaders. Not one hesitated in their support of Care Partners Initiative, and that is Fire Chief Steve Aker, Police Chief Brandon Cutting, who is here this evening, Cheryl Johnson, CEO, Sonoma Valley Community Health Center, John Hennelly, CEO, Sonoma Valley Hospital, and Cameron Safarloo from the Hannah Center. We were so pleased that these leaders from the Valley came forward, not even hesitating to do that for the organization. And we think it's a very important statement, and that's why we're pleased it's here on your agenda this evening. It's just, it's a great honor to be here for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Mrs. Agramonte. Any other comments on the consent calendar?
Yeah, Whitney Evans, 51 Second Street East. And those who know me know I am an optimist, so I'm an optimist that today will be a red letter day for the 1,000 people in Sonoma Valley that have dementia. And my wife is one of those, and she is a happy person. She is going to be so much happier with this resolution and the beginning of dementia-free, friendly Sonoma Valley. And there is a downside to that, though. And the downside is that the Ecology Center, is very concerned about global warming. And her smile is a major reason for the melting of the ice cap. So just be concerned because sea level is going to rise. So it's really a magic moment, for us. And I'm so pleased with the support that we've gotten, from everybody. And Rebecca has a pin. Our sunflower is going to be our logo. And at the next city council meeting, we're looking forward to 5 sunflowers on your lapels, here. And it's going to be a great way for the community to embrace, respect, and honor, particularly the caregivers. And, Jim and Dorothy and my friend Tom, it's been a great ride for us, and we're finally at a point where we can really go after making a difference in the lives of these 1,000 people more than 1,000 that are their caregivers. So thank you for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Hello, my name's Tom Deegan, 24 Contental Court. Thank you for seeing us, Mayor Lowe and City Council. I'm here in support of the signing of the letter for dementia-friendly Sonoma Valley. This is an organization that we're going to be able to join with that's going to make our community more sensitive and helpful to the people suffering from dementia and specifically their caretakers. Caregivers Initiative is really started and focused by Whitney and Jim in order to try to figure out a way to get more respite as they give 36-hour-a-day care to their loved one. And so we're looking for a way to increase the opportunities for socialization, increase the opportunities for businesses to recognize and benefit from these people coming out of their shelter and coming out of hiding. So we really appreciate if you would take the opportunity to sign the letter that will be going in with our application, which I'm pretty sure we're going to be approved on. I've left each one of you a file, and you should get this afterwards. The first thing is the sunflower. We had a logo designed specifically for this. This is dementia-friendly Sonoma Valley, and this will be on stickers that we put on front of businesses. This will be on cups. This will be on pins. This will be in the newspaper. This will be everywhere you see if we move forward with this. So we're really excited about that. Also in there is our continuum of care. We have 11 touch points that we're going to be able to offer the community, from support groups to memory cafes to forums and educational opportunities, social activities, and memory cafes. Memory cafes are something is kind of a small R when it comes to respite, unlike day programs, which is the big R, where the person can actually leave and get some things done. We've had arrangements now with the movie theater to do a memory cafe movie for the people that come out to a movie in the morning. We have Black Bear Diner that has opened up their back room for us to have a memory cafe. We're working with the Sonoma County Library, who's also looking for a partner to be a memory cafe, and they've selected us, and we're going to test that in Sonoma, and then if it works, it'll roll out across every library in Sonoma County. So in there, in the folder, you also have a definition of what each one of these things are. And the last two things is, one is on November 4th, we're having a music forum. It runs from 10 to 2 at the Burlingame Hall. You'll see information about this in the newspaper and in these announcements. You also have the invitation. We invite you all to come. What's good about this is we're going to be able to have, we expect over 100 people, and they can take things home and incorporate music and art into their lives. Speaking of art, Mayor, this is a good opportunity. There's a great book called Your Brain on Art that I recommend. The last thing is we're trying to get 1,000 people in town to match the 1,000 caregivers to become a dementia friend. This takes 5 minutes on the internet. The address is on the back. Join it, you get a certificate, you can frame it and be proud of it, and we're going to ask all the businesses to have at least one person do this in there so they can have it framed in their business as well. So I thank you for all your time, and I hope that we'll be able to get the letter from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on the consent calendar? Are there any comments on Zoom? Seeing none, we'll bring this back to the council. Are there any polls? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I will move to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, the clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And many thanks to those who came and spoke. We appreciate all the good work that you are doing. Moving on, we are at the regular calendar. And the first item on that is to adopt the resolution accepting the downtown parking management plan. And Oh, I'm
It's
sorry,
the-
we're at the public hearing. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Okay, we're at the public hearing where we're to adopt a resolution amending the City of Sonoma master fee schedule for planning, building, public works, and special events. And Jennifer Gates, the Community Development Director, will be addressing this issue. Ms. Gates, please.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, we are talking about the update to the Sonoma Master Fee Schedule. And in April of 2023, City Council had adopted a resolution with this new Master Fee Schedule for fiscal year 22-23, as well as continuing on until this fiscal year. So upon a further review by staff, we noticed that some items were missing, some were maybe incorrectly calculated, and others just needed some further clarification on what they were really looking for and matching our current processes. So that's what's being presented tonight, and that's for Planning Department, Building Department, Public Works, and the special events fees. So these, again, are proposed changes that are just minimal. We would consider this an interim fix for this fiscal year to continue on, and that staff will come back to you with a proposal in the future to do a master fee schedule and have a study be completed that works with all of our processes for all of our different departments and kind of reanalyze how we charge fees and come back for that approval to you in the future. So again, tonight we're just looking at certain fees, and this very first fees are all of the new fees that are being proposed. And again, new fees doesn't necessarily mean they're brand new to us. It's just something that we wanted to make sure get called out specifically. So an example of this is building. We already do an inspection fee for siding repair and replacement, but we're looking to actually make it a quicker process. And so we identified it at the $177, which it would have been more. So again, these are reductions in some cases or clarifications. Another example is the deposit for planning peer reviews. This is a new deposit. However, we already do require the payment of peer reviews of certain documents. This is just to clarify that we're going to be asking you for a deposit to help us cover those costs to do that peer review. Lastly, Public Works has identified a couple of hourly rates that weren't currently called out in their prior fee schedule. The rest of these fees on the next few slides are amending existing fees. I did want to bring your attention to two main ones. One is the deposit for environmental review. We're just going to reduce that down to $20,000 as that initial deposit. At the end of the day, they will pay that complete cost, just like they would do today, but we want to just clarify what that initial deposit amount needs to be. The larger change for planning is what you see is the deposit increase from $438 to $1,642. This is the calculation that was provided for an SB 9 lot split was incorrect on the number of hours it would actually take. So we wanted to be more correct in that reflection instead of going back to them and saying, we need more money. So we want to start out with more of that correct estimate. Public Works also had some amendments to their fees. Many of these that you'll see are reductions or slight increases in that fee amount. And again, it's just to clarify who is actually performing the work, aligning our process with the actual fees. Again, some inspection fees that are changing and being reduced, or an hourly rate that's being corrected. And lastly, special events also had some corrections that again align with what their current processes are and also reflect the reduction of some of these fees to reflect the actual time. Two more different types of fees that we're doing. We're clarifying some fees. So again, just correcting typographical errors or amending some specific language that was included in the actual fees, just to make it very clear of what's going on. And then lastly, we are proposing to delete some fees. These fees are no longer used. The processes don't exist anymore, or the permit types don't exist. And so these are just, again, cleanup items that we are looking to modify from that current fee schedule. And this is to help reduce any confusion. So staff's recommendation is to conduct the public hearing and adopt a resolution approving these amendments to the Sonoma master fee schedule. And staff is available to answer any questions, and as well as staff from special events and public works.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions before I open the public hearing? Any questions specific to the report? And we'll come back for comments. Okay, seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. And are there any members of the public who would like to comment on the proposed resolution? Please come forward and speak to the microphone. Yes, please.
I'm Kayla, resident of Sunset Street. I have a question for you. I don't know.
You address the questions to us, and
I'm
then
sorry.
that's all right.
Yeah, regarding this peer review amendment, this new proposal, like, what is that? For example, I have my property. I want to go to Sonoma Public. What is exactly she means by peer review, $5,000 fee? Like, for us as has home or need some work done on the backyard, on the sewage, or on the street, so, or even a house. So I don't know what is that exactly, because it's being, mentioned. So I feel like
Okay,
I
and
need
if
to
you
know.
if you don't mind answering the question, we'll answer that, get that answer for you. Thank you.
Sure. So the peer review is actually when studies are being prepared for applicants by the actual applicant instead of by somebody that's hired through the city. We request that peer reviews happen to have a second opinion, to either concur or maybe call attention to maybe some other things that aren't identified in their studies. So it's just in regards to studies themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else from the public have any comments or questions regarding the proposed resolution? Okay, seeing none. Any on Zoom? None on Zoom. We'll close the public hearing and bring this back to the council for any comments regarding this before we entertain a motion. Any questions or comments? Mr. Wellander.
First, just a comment to staff. Thank you for the cleanup. I'm always grateful for clarity. I would like to, and maybe I should have spoken up earlier, I'd love to just hear a little bit about the process of the next step. You mentioned that you're going to hire a consultant. That consultant then, how is that how does that process take place?
Sure, I'll take a shot at this. What we're planning to do is bring back in the 24-25 budget process is funding for a consultant to bring on board to do a full cost study for fees. That's going to do two things. One is going to look at the process on how fees are calculated, so it's consistent across the different departments that Jennifer talked about. And then also do a full cost recovery analysis of what that would take. And then at that point, council will then have a chance to weigh in on how much to charge for those fees, in terms of how much do you want to charge full cost recovery or some less than that. And so we'll go through that process with you. We'll engage the development community, we'll engage the public in that process as well. This won't be done in a vacuum, but we do need to look at our entire fee structure, as Jennifer said, because there are inconsistencies between different departments and different types of fees that we need to clean up. So again, in terms of timeline, my recommendation would be that we get that in the budget in 24-25, and then that happens in that fiscal year and is completed.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. That's it.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Mr. Ding, you have your light on, or is that, no? No questions?
Yeah, no question.
Okay, any others? Mr. Gurney?
Yeah, I would just like to thank you for a very comprehensive report with the detail and explaining what exactly was being done. And I look forward to studying these further.
Yes, and I agree, and I like the fact you use the term cost recovery. These are not taxes. These are fees that help us do the work that you are asking us to do. This is not, so we try to make them to be absolutely in line with the work that needs to be done, and no more. Possibly less, but no more. Okay, yes, Mr.
No, I
Farrar,
just
I'm sorry.
also want to appreciate, understand the level of work it takes to go through all of this and find the inconsistencies and make sure that you have all the inconsistencies and then come up with the right corrections. So I really, really appreciate this work. I know that it's a lot of work to get this done, and it shows that it was done very well.
Thank you. So, hearing that, is there a motion to approve or adopt the resolution?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second?
All right. The clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Ding,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, and thank you again for the complete report. Now we're on to the regular calendar. And the first thing is the resolution accepting the downtown parking management plan. Again, Ms. Gates is up, and we also have Ms. Tierney with us to give the report. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So again, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Jennifer Gates, Community Development Director. So before you tonight is the Downtown Parking Management Plan prepared by W-Trans in coordination with staff that, as many of you know, has been a multi-year effort to develop strategies to address parking challenges in downtown Sonoma. The plan builds on a study of the parking conditions in downtown that was prepared in 2017 and includes a coordinated set of recommendations designed to improve parking. Staff is recommending that City Council adopt the resolution accepting the downtown parking management plan and authorizing staff to move forward with Phase 1 recommended measures. Staff will analyze the effectiveness of that Phase 1 to determine if the City Council should consider implementing Phase 2, which will be brought back to City Council at that time once it's better understood if Phase 1 worked. So with that, Brian Canepa with W-Trans is here to present the parking study and the recommendations that are before you tonight as part of Phase 1, and staff will be available to answer any questions you have after his presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mr. Canepa.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of City Council. Thank you for also pronouncing my last name correctly. That is a feat unto itself, so thank you.
I happen to know several people with that last name. You got lucky.
Okay, all right, this is good. There are Canepas I've heard in the Bay Area,
okay.
too, they pronounce it differently. So anyways, well, thank you again for having me here tonight. Again, Brian Canepa with W-Trans. I saw some of you a year ago in August 2022 when we brought, I think, the initial draft to council to get some of your ideas here. But this study actually goes back further than this. It actually goes back even before I was even with W-Trans. I think the initial project started in 2014, I believe, 2015. And the initial draft for this report went to Public Works in 2017. This has been moving along slowly, and now we're here in August, or the report is August 2023, and here to present to you tonight. The two reports are relatively similar in nature in terms of their kind of their table of contents, but the one thing that I will point out is that in the initial report, all of the data collection was done at the time in July of 2015. We did not replicate that as part of the new effort. We relied on the data from that time. And you might ask, why would you do that? Normally, we do go out and actually collect new data. In this particular case, the data itself showed that parking demand was very high in the downtown. And talking with David Storer, who was the community development director at the time, felt that parking demand hadn't changed substantially. In his words, we know we have a problem. We don't need to go out and have you collect more data to tell us there's a problem. We need solutions to it. So really the focus of this study is more focused on management strategies rather than going out and trying to reassess the actual demand. The survey area, when I'm referring to the downtown, it's essentially kind of large square area. So we're talking to the bike path on the north, Patton Street to the south, and then 2nd Street West and 2nd Street East. And the study itself and the data collection covered all of the public on-street lots as well as the public off-street lots, the 2 lots that you see on the map here, one of which is Casa Grande, the larger one, and the other smaller one off of East Napa Street. This is just a different view of that same map, but essentially it shows the 28 block faces that we actually counted as well as the 2 lots. In total, from just the public spaces, again, there are many private parking spaces in the area. This is just public right now. There is almost 840 parking spaces, the majority of which are on-street. On-street spaces, 3-hour time limited, 9 to 5 Monday through Saturday. The off-street essentially have no limitations. So where does this get us? So we looked at all the data. Again, we went back to all of our findings. We said, what are the key findings that we're pulling from this? And I won't go through all 6 of these. I'll focus on the key ones. The first of which is that particularly the on-street spaces in downtown are heavily utilized. I mean, they're maxed out, particularly at certain times of the year during certain days. And it's not only the on-street spaces. You also have your off-street lots, which are high occupancy. And it's happening during weekends, which is not surprising. Anyone knows that the tourism boom here during the summer really helps drive that. But also on Thursday evenings, Friday evenings in particular, we're looking at parking occupancy counts. The area, particularly around the plaza, is just packed. It's pretty full. People are out shopping, still eating, doing other activities. And what we found from the data anecdotally is that there was actually a fair amount of spillover occurring into the neighborhoods during these periods. Not surprisingly, a lot of communities have this. When it gets very full, people end up looking for parking and they park in front of people's homes instead. So looking at this, historically, a lot of the ways that parking studies have been conducted in the past is they look at this and say, okay, your parking is full. Well, clearly you need more parking. That will solve your problem. But in fact, that doesn't actually solve the problem. It really never has, because the core issue is that everyone, frankly, wants to park in the same place, right? No one wants to park in a garage 4 blocks away when they're in a downtown. They want to park right in front of their business. I'm not recommending we build a garage. I'm just using it as an example. And so really the goal of this study is to better manage demand, to create availability, primarily in on-street spaces, but in off-street spaces as well. And so the study came up with a whole host of goals and objectives. There's a lot of text on the screen. I'm not going to cite it all to you. But some of the key points to this are really trying to come up with management strategies that create this park once idea, that someone can park once and be able to access everything they need to within the downtown. And by doing so, trying to look at the parking system as an integrated entity, right? On-street parking, what happens in on-street parking affects off-street parking. What happens in public spaces affects private and vice versa. So looking at this holistically really needs to happen in order for it to make sense. And at the end of the day, another key component of this is really using all of your existing resources to the best degree possible. If there are empty spaces that aren't getting used at certain hours next to places that are jam-packed, we want to know why, and if there's anything we can do about it. So these are kind of some of the major goals and objectives that we're looking at here for this study. So we put together this toolbox of strategies. As Jennifer said, this is in the report referred to as phase 1. These are all of the strategies, I think there are 9 of them, that we are recommending to move forward with right now. And for those of you who can't see extremely small type, it's parking enforcement, parking wayfinding, having to do with loading zones, shared parking agreements, on-street time restrictions, bicycle parking, special event bicycle parking, enhanced mobility information, and downtown circulator. The table here is actually designed to show kind of general scale of effectiveness in terms of managing demand and the ease of implementation. So our approach to this, and the reason why we broke this study into 2 phases, is because, frankly, I have a philosophy about parking, as I do in life, that the best management is when you can do the least amount and, quote, fix the problem. So you don't want to throw a kitchen sink at something that doesn't require it. And so these measures here have a higher degree of easier implementation, right? Wayfinding signage, for example, has a 5, so it's very easy to implement. But will it solve all your problems? Probably not, but still it'll help you move in the right direction. And so I'll go through each of these in turn and describe them in a little bit more detail, focusing on some more than others. The first of which is parking enforcement. Basically just heightened enforcement at the end of the day. One of the issues that we heard from stakeholder input during the initial study was that there are a fair number of long-term parkers who are parking on street, either illegally or doing the shuffle, so moving from one spot to another every 2 or 3 hours. And being able to get those folks out of those spaces into less convenient spaces frees up prime on-street parking for patrons, people who need it, people who are trying to make quick trips. Ultimately, this is not about punishment and punitive action. Even if you do increase parking enforcement, the idea is that you do it in a way that, at least if you're going to step it up, you issue warnings first. You don't just come out and immediately ticket folks, but you have a process to it. And then you try to take advantage of any technology at the time and consider that as an option to see if you can do it more cost effectively. As I mentioned, wayfinding. Again, this is something that people are very familiar with. It was just a few years ago that the city actually already upgraded some of the parking wayfinding signs in the downtown, which is great. Static wayfinding signage like the free public parking sign here is an example of that. But there are, if the city ever wanted to pursue it, there are what they have real-time availability things. So, for example, if you've gone into San Francisco oftentimes, even before you get into the garage, you can see how many spaces are available there. There are not many large lots here available in downtown. This would really only apply to Casa Grande, and I'm just mentioning it as reference. But there are also great signage done in other towns for pedestrian guidance, saying, like this here is from San Jose, saying, gosh, it's only a 5-minute walk from here from point A to point B. People oftentimes don't have a good sense of how far things are, and they say, oh, 5 minutes, maybe I actually could walk that. And it could be, again, very, very cheap, minimal cost signage that does this. Passenger loading zones. One of the things that we heard from the initial study, or at least found from the data collection, is that quite a few folks at particularly like key hours are either parking in red zones or parking in the middle of the street to load and unload passengers, which sometimes will either block traffic, potentially cause a safety problem. And so looking at the plaza, there are a couple opportunities to maybe introduce more passenger loading zones, whether the people are doing it in a private vehicle or if it's an Uber or Lyft dropping you off, you can say that's where it is and try to place them in convenient locations. Again, these are drop-off zones. So again, if you're familiar with the white curbs, that's what they look like. People come and go very quickly. But at the end of the day, it can improve safety and it helps mitigate the double parking that people sometimes do. All right, now we're going to get into a little bit more complicated things. I apologize, I'm kind of moving relatively quickly. Shared parking. Shared parking occurs when you have potentially multiple uses using the same parking lot. And in this particular case, what we're recommending is that the city explore shared parking agreements with willing private lot owners in the downtown, saying, hey, lot owner, a lot of spaces are empty in your lot after your business has closed up for the day. Is there a possibility that we could make your lot publicly accessible after those hours, like this sign shows, and so members of the public could park here? And create essentially a kind of a win-win situation. Now, obviously, private lot owners will have concerns about this, and rightfully so. And that will depend on the private lot owner. It might be liability. It might be cleanliness in the lot. It could be lighting. It could be a whole host of things. But I actually have a nice toolbox of actual shared parking agreements that have been signed before that can be used as examples with different entities. And again, not everyone would participate in this, not even close. But even if you just had a few folks participating, it could really open up some valuable resources close to the core of the downtown. Also, and this is because we have the Casa Grande lot here, I listed it under the shared parking, but really that's a state parks entity. But we would encourage the city to continue talks with the state parks to make sure that that's accessible to various users of the downtown. And this is essentially just a simple map that we use to identify potential lots. So if any private lot owners are here on the line tonight, these are not a given, these are just some ideas about where potential lots are based on our anecdotal evidence of where parking is available. But as you can see from here, this is almost 1,300 spaces. There's a lot of parking in this area that is private. Would some of these spaces be open all the time? No, absolutely not. They might only be open during the evenings or maybe on weekends or during certain periods. But there are opportunities here to be able to, make it possible for you to park somewhere rather than having to circle the block continually. On-street time restrictions. So currently on street, in general, around the downtown, there are a few exceptions here and there. Hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and it's 3 hours. We looked hard at this, and we actually got quite a bit of public feedback on this, interestingly enough, when we issued the draft last August. Our recommendation is to go to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day, not just, so don't exclude Sundays, but keep it at 3 hours. The reason for that is because right now you have a situation where it's relatively easy, for employees to shuffle their cars around if you can park for 3 hours and it's only 9 to 5. Add to that you can be an employer, you can be someone, let's say you're a shift worker and you come to your restaurant at 3 p.m. in the evening, 4 p.m. in the evening. You can stay there in that front spot, that front door spot all night, blocking potential patrons who actually want to come and go more quickly. And with Sunday management, there really is not a great reason now for Sundays to be exempt from parking hours if your downtown is active, as Sonoma is. If your downtown is not active on a Sunday, then yes, it doesn't make sense to have time limits. But here, the downtown, especially during the summertime, is hopping. You have a lot of folks here, and you actually, by not having time limits in effect, you're allowing potential long-term parkers to stay there all day. Theoretically, someone could park in a space here at 2 p.m. on a Saturday and not leave until noon on Monday, and that would be legal. So that's why I kind of mentioned earlier about some employees who are, frankly, they're legally parking on street, but the idea is to create turnover. And a lot of the busiest hours of the downtown here are in the evenings. Now, if you're still someone who gets off work and says, hey, I want to go downtown, I want to park and not have a problem, great, you can still park at 5 p.m. and have no problems parking there for 3 hours. The point that members of the public made, some, in terms of the time restrictions, is we had about 50-50 split. 50% said we'd really like to see 2 hours. 50% said, please keep the 3 hours. And what I found was it generally split along the lines of, I think, primarily residents who make more frequent quick trips to downtown, and more of the retailers in the area who said, I depend on people to stay in the downtown. I don't want to drive them away because they only can stay 2 hours and they feel like they have to leave. So looking at this and the kind of the competing interests there, we said keeping the 3 hours is probably a good idea because you can cater to both groups at the same time by doing that. It's not going to make everyone happy, but it's a probably preferred option. Bicycle parking and special event valet parking. So I know the city is kind of considering this on like a broader scale, but basically improving the bicycle parking that's in the downtown, placing it closer to the businesses where people are actually accessing, and to reevaluate the municipal code at the same time. Most modern municipal codes have kind of evolved to a point where they require both long-term and short-term parking. So racks for people who are coming quickly, long-term parking for employees or people who need to park off street. And the city already does this, but the city, partners sometimes with the Bicycle Coalition and just encouraging the city to continue doing that for special events. Enhanced mobility information. So this is an example on the side, which of course is in very small lettering again, so I apologize. But there are cities out there that have really great websites. The one here is from San Rafael. We've listed some in the report. I think San Rafael, Walnut Creek, Santa Rosa, San Luis Obispo. There's websites out there that can offer a lot of information about how to get to and from and within your city. And it's not only, this recommendation though is not just about a website, it's about highlighting your existing resources. So Go Sonoma is a program that's offered countywide that offers essentially free money via gift cards to people who do not drive alone to work. I would be willing to bet most people don't know about this. They don't know about the fact that they offer free ride matching for carpools, that they offer free emergency ride home. They offer free information on taking transit or van pooling, etc. This is all free. And so this is the sort of information that you really want to be able to disseminate to all the different users of the community, particularly employees, which is why we kind of highlighted the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce here. Last strategy is the downtown circulator. We included this because it's already under consideration, apparently, with the city and local hotels about how do you potentially connect the hotels or other destinations within the town to the downtown. And I would note that downtown circulators actually, people I think in their minds oftentimes get a concept of a circulator being a bus. It's like this big bus, and that's what is shown in the lower right here. And a lot of circulators do operate that way, and there are advantages to that. You could simply run it on Highway 12 back and forth through the downtown. Another option that we put out there in the report is to consider, if downtown circulators are an option, using app-based service. So providers like Circuit offer electric vehicles that offer point-to-point service. So you don't have to wait for a bus. You just simply get on your phone, ping it, just like a Lyft or an Uber, and it will take you anywhere you want to go within the downtown. Of course, it all has to be financed some way, just like a downtown circulator does, and that's the key. But these are options to consider as the city continues with its conversation about potentially pursuing a downtown circulator. Lastly, that was phase one. Phase two strategies. I want to be very clear up front here. We are not recommending that these strategies be implemented right now. We were asked as part of our study to look at the full range of parking management solutions that were available to the city. And as I mentioned earlier, our preference is always to go with those that have the least amount of effort of implementation and least cost first. These strategies here are those would be only considered if deemed necessary. You said all else fails, nothing else is working, we still have a serious problem, what else can we do? These would be options to potentially pursue. And of course, I think as Jennifer mentioned earlier, they would have to come back to council for approval anyways. So I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on this because we're frankly not recommending these at this point. But this is, the most contentious one here obviously is parking meters. We got many comments back from people on our draft report about parking meters, which I fully expect, although even we're not recommending it at this point. I want to make that case again. But I understand it would have to be something that would be weighed carefully, I would say, if it were considered in the future. So thank you for your time. I apologize that was a mouthful, but happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you so much. Questions for Mr. Canepa from the council before we open it up to the public? Mr. Wellander.
I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about how to create successful shared lots. This idea has come up in the past, and I know that as you've expressed, there are concerns such as liability, cleanliness, lighting, etc. What has been your experiences where these programs have actually been enacted, and what did the city have to give to the private business to motivate them to open up their lots?
Excellent question. So I'll back up a second and say normally these agreements are done on a case-by-case basis. It's not like there's a blanket template that simply applies to everyone, okay? So I would say liability is certainly one of the top ones that comes into play here. And oftentimes cities will then just simply cover that lot within its liability, knowing that an accident is probably very rare going to occur. You have cleanliness and cleanup, so sweeping the lot, making sure people aren't there late at night dropping beer bottles or whatever the case happens to be. You have some places that will say, gosh, my lot needs improvements. As part of this agreement, I want you to repave my lot every 5 or 10 years. Or, gosh, I need better lighting in my lot. It's really, these lights are old and clunky. I really would like the city to replace them. Some lot owners might say, I want cold hard cash. Nothing speaks better than that. That's what I want. And the city then has to make a determination about what those spaces are worth to it. And frankly, the private lot owner does too. And you might have some private lot owners who look at this and say, no way, I'm not going to open up my lot no matter what. I just have a visceral hate of this sort of thing. Fine, that's okay. Oftentimes, my contact who I know in Sacramento has about 80 or 90 of these agreements with different lots around the city. And they build upon each other. The initial first couple are the hardest to get because people are the most skeptical that they'll work. But once you have a proven track record of success and saying, oh yeah, John down the street there shared his lot and everything's fine. He got like a brand new parking lot out of it. That changes minds. But again, we offered a lot of options, but I certainly wouldn't guarantee that certain individuals would sign up or not.
Thank you.
So if we're using data that came from, I believe, 2015, is that
Yes.
what we said? And what kind of metrics do you use to determine if phase one strategies are effective?
Excellent question. So right now, when you look at, well, if you look at the 2015 data, the typical metric that we use to see whether or not a block is full is normally if it's between 85 to 100% occupied. And you also look at turnover data to see how frequently those spaces are turning over. The less frequent that they're turning over indicates that you have people who are potentially staying there for long periods of time, who you might not want staying there for longer periods of time. So a better metric or way to determine whether you've succeeded or not is to see, has your occupancy better distributed itself around the downtown? So are your remote, for example, spaces being better utilized and some of your front door spaces maybe being a little less utilized? You still want them to be full. People want to park in those spaces. And also measuring the turnover. So if you go along a block right now and you say, gosh, my average turnover is every 4 hours, that's a problem. Even if your average turnover was 2 hours or 3 hours, you might say that's a problem because it means that some people are staying 20 minutes and some people might be staying 6 hours. So being able to reassess the data and seeing basically if you've managed to move, in particular, those longer term parkers out of those spaces into other spaces. Now, granted, that's part of the shared parking strategy, right? You need spaces to move employees to. They don't just magically go away. So you need to be able to identify lots or other resources where employees can feasibly park that are maybe not in quite as convenient locations.
Other questions? Patricia?
Yes, I just want to think from a point of view that we're really in a world of lowering vehicle miles traveled. And so other than bicycle parking and the downtown circulator, which actually would help to improve that situation, having less cars coming, what else in this plan and what else have you looked at, except for the future strategies that you're not recommending, that actually reduce the number of cars coming? I know I see, that there's the parking, the walking signs, like, but all of that is really pretty, yes, low-hanging fruit and not really getting to the gut of the issue of how do we cut vehicle miles traveled.
So in order to cut vehicle miles traveled, and this is something, my specialty is in parking and transportation demand management. Transportation demand management focuses almost exclusively on how to reduce VMT. That's one of the key components of it. It was a little outside the purview of this study. This study was very much focused from the start on parking. How do you make parking more available in the downtown? If the goal is ultimately to reduce drive-alone trips, reduce vehicle miles traveled, what more cities are considering now and actually doing are passing what they call TDM ordinances, which essentially places requirements on normally new, you could have applied to existing, but that's a much heavier lift, that require new uses to provide alternative means to get around. So, for example, here it's a little difficult because we're not in a transit mecca here. The transit service here is relatively limited. But you do have opportunities in some areas to say, well, you have to mandate, like the bicycle parking I said is an option. You can mandate that you have, even I've worked in more remote places out in Contra Costa County, that they have now mandated and instituted, well, the Clipper card might go away soon, but essentially Clipper card money, right? And so for those of you who don't know what that is, essentially your transit card. So every month, no matter whether you like it or not, you have this transit money to use. And not only for local buses around here, because you might not find that convenient, but maybe you'll take SMART sometimes. Maybe you'll take regional rail. Maybe you'll take other modes. There are other incentives. There's ride matching programs as well. Actually, we just did that in Contra Costa County as well, where basically the development was required to put in its own ride matching service and school pool service for itself and the surrounding neighborhood to say, we're going to set up this service so everyone will actually be able to match people together for carpooling and for kids who are school pooling together. I'm just showing you a few options right now. Now, if you really want to lower VMT, I mean, at the end of the day, the best way to do that is frankly limit the amount of parking that's available. If people don't have as many cars, they won't drive as much. But, you know, frankly, in an area like this, that's tough to do given the market conditions. You know, again, I'm doing another study out in the Central Valley, but, you know, it's in a similar built area, and the developers and lenders that we've been talking to have stated quite openly that unless they provide a certain amount of parking, it's just not feasible. So that's why when we looked at these options, we really wanted to weigh ones that were a little bit more feasible than not. But I would say if you're really looking to decrease VMT and promote sustainability, the TDM ordinance is probably one of the best ways to do that.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Ding?
My question regarding public and the private partnership, that is very important because and the liability, you know, the concern. It's, for example, you just mentioned the Bank of America parking lot at the 54. You know, I can see, and that is in a private parking, you know, obviously. However, each Tuesday night farmers market when I pass by, always in the full.
Yeah.
So, any chance, you know, we already talk with the Bank of America, or just keep as is, just lay it all out there, doing the nothing, or in case any accident or liabilities, I just concern.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat it back to make sure I understood the question. So is the question whether or not you should broach the subject of sharing now?
Yes, we talk to face, talk to the Bank of America, or just doing the nothing. Which one is the?
Well, I would say absolutely do something. That's what we're saying as part of the study. You lose nothing by talking, right? Just by simply talking with folks and broaching the subject, you don't necessarily lose anything. That said, I'll be frank, some entities are very difficult to negotiate with, national banks being some of those. Oftentimes when I've tried to do this in the past, brokering these shared parking agreements, they say, gosh, I'd love to help you. You have to talk to X, Y, and Z lawyer who's in our New York branch. And then they just kind of scuff it off and don't want to deal with it. So don't be surprised if, you know, Bank of America or a place like that has that sort of reaction. But until you actually go out and start face-to-face having meetings with folks and saying, here's what we're thinking about. What do you think? What would make it worth your while? How can we get this done? And then you might talk to 10 people and maybe only one or two say, yeah, I'm interested. Let's talk about this a little bit more. But until you actually initiate, you don't know what you're going to get. So that's something that, I mean, we recommend starting now because, I mean, at the very least, you just say, gosh, we weren't able to come to agreement. At the best, you say, we came out with something that's mutually beneficial.
Okay, it's good to know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions before we open a public comment? I have a question that's it, with regard to loading zones. In your research, how much of an impact was it of, I mean, I don't personally notice as people dropping people off and double parking around the plaza. Is that something, and my concern is that if we create these loading zones, I mean, currently there's one I've talked to Mr. Berger about before that has to do with, that we did during COVID. It was necessary to pick up food that we instituted some of those. And then I would drive around and the loading zones were still there and they were always open and they were in prime locations where people would like to park and near stores that, you know, when you're coming to the plaza, you're, you know, potentially buying wine. It's heavy. It's not, you know, you need places to be able to take your giant jarre bomb of wine to, you know, it's heavy. So, so I just wonder how much of a, you know, how much are we fixing a problem that we don't have with the loading zone. The other thing is, I kind of wish we still had Sonoma Taxi or Vern's or even a frequent Lyft or Uber. We unfortunately don't. I mean, you could wait a day, you know, to most people are doing private ride shares with people they know. There's people that work in the valley that that help with that, but we don't have a lot of that. So I'm just wondering if this, in your research, this was something that was a problem, because I worry that we're trying to fix a problem that's not necessarily a problem we have at this point.
Yep, I think that's an excellent point. This, probably all of the different strategies that we have on here of the 9 is probably the least important, I would say. And if it was dropped from the strategy altogether, it would not make or break the system. It was simply something that we had heard in our feedback during the initial study and actually witnessed from some of our parking data collectors, saying there was double parking going on, primarily during peak hours. And the opportunity to try to find spaces that are currently underutilized or are not even really necessarily striped as spaces, which is why we were looking at the southwest corner of the plaza. There's some area there that could be striped as a loading zone. Again, you know, whether you see cars there or not is difficult to say, because even if someone's dropping off, they're normally there for less than a minute. And so they come and go very quickly. But again, yeah, I mean, I would agree with your assessment. This is something that might be nice to have, but I wouldn't necessarily hinge a lot on it.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there are no more questions at this time, we will come back. I'm sure that there are some people here that came to comment on this, and we will open public comment on this item before we bring it back to the council. Is there anyone here to comment on this item?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Lowe, members of the council, staff, and public. I'm Tom Conlon. I live just outside the city limits, but I have a couple of ancestors buried in those cemeteries, so thanks for taking good care of them for us. I also serve as your vice chair of the Climate Action Commission. And although we have discussed this in our Transportation Ad Hoc Committee, as well as before our full commission, the comments I'm making tonight are entirely my own personal comments, but you can refer back to those records for our written and deliberative discussions. Our commission has identified transportation greenhouse gas emissions to be our top priority. And this is, of course, in concurrence with regional consensus as summarized in the Regional Climate Protection Authority's greenhouse gas inventory, most recently completed based on 2020 data, which found that approximately 60% of Sonoma cities' emissions are derived from transportation, on-road transportation, and that is because our population has the highest trip rates. We drive more per capita than do the other jurisdictions in the county. And our visitors as well. And so it's also consistent with State Air Resources Board recommendations for local governments in Appendix D of the recent scoping study. It's where VMT reduction is considered a key priority strategy for reaching California's 2030 and 2045 carbon goals, climate goals. And where parking strategies in particular are known to be able to reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions by approximately 11 to 19%. So it's one of the most cost-effective and really effective things we can be doing. So with respect to our the consultant, I sympathize, frankly, because the scope that they were given to work with did not include any of this. And you see that reflected in the book before you tonight. So I do want to say that I support moving forward tonight on the priority phase 1 recommendations that have been brought before you. It's important that we do get started on parking changes here in the city of Sonoma. I would point out that in the agenda there is a box that says, is there a nexus to the Climate Action 2020 plan that the city approved in 2016? In fact, there is a direct nexus, I believe, and that is that there was a measure called Local Measure 5L7, supporting parking policy measures, which the city did indicate that it would provide priority parking for low-emission vehicles, carpools, and van pools. It would at least look at that. So that's something you should consider. And then just I'll finish up by saying this is not a new problem. There are plenty of, I'm concerned about the cost implications of the recommendations, though. I haven't heard that discussed tonight, and I hope you'll get into some of that because enforcement is not free. And the way we typically see that dealt with in cities is through a parking benefits district where the benefits of the fees collected go right back into the zone where where the funds are collected. So that's how you keep everybody happy, and this is successful all over the world. We can certainly do it here in Sonoma. Thank you for consideration of my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Conlon. Any other comments? Mr. Zimmerman, please.
Good evening. Armando Zimmerman, West Spain Street. I'm basically, I read the article in the IT, so I haven't seen the entire report. But nonetheless, in reading that article, just a couple of things that came up was commercial vehicle, tourist buses, tourist vans, and whatever. During the high tourist season, especially when it's hot, it's not unusual for buses sometimes, or even these larger vans, to park in my neighborhood, which is outside of that second street. I'm, another half block up on the west side. And when that happens, the driver stays. It's usually empty. He's not unloading people, but the engine's idling. And sometimes it's a gas engine, sometimes it's a diesel, the AC's running, et cetera, et cetera. So not only is it annoying to me, but it's a health hazard. And I have knocked on the windows and in a nice way said, there's a city ordinance that talks about unloading and loading. And it's interesting how these drivers, I'm not trying to put them on the spot, but they don't seem to know about that. And they also don't seem to know where they can go to park their vehicles while they're waiting, for the tour to end or to come back or whatever, that kind of stuff. So I did want to comment on that. But my main concern is the spillover. The spillover into my neighborhood, and I'm sure other neighborhoods that are in that, commercial or that strict zone that was pointed out. But that spillover is a half a block this way, this, that, and the other. And what happens in my neighborhood is we have insufficient red curbs. I personally, this is a personal thing, my driveway is 10 feet wide where I can go into my property. I should have, they're obliterated 3 foot on one side, 3 foot. So I should have technically some leeway there to get in, even if it's 10 feet here, but I can go in I'm talking about if I come down the street right now and I want to go into my driveway, I literally have to stop to make a right turn into my driveway. And if I'm being tailgated, which I often am, the driver behind me is not happy about that, and will often go around me over the yellow lines, the double yellow lines. So that is to me a problem, and I've lived there going on 12 years. You can barely see my red 3 foot. What do we call those spacers? Anybody want to help me with that? You can't see them. They're obliterated, but I've been told that I can't paint my own. So I think it's a traffic hazard. I'll end my, what I'm going to say. Yesterday, there was a large vehicle, SUV or whatever, encroached into my my red, maybe because they didn't see it. So it diminished my 10 feet. It was there all day long. And the point is, I don't know. I hope they're having a good time. I'm not against, people having a good time and whatever. But when I have to pull out of my driveway, I've got this large car, and if I'm going to go to the right, I have to pull out almost into the traffic so that I can have a line of sight to my right. If I want to go left, and there's another large vehicle, which happens on this side, I have to pull out into the street so that I can see basically what's coming west to east. So this,
Thank you.
I'm sure I'm not the only person, and I'm sure that in this move to, enhance parking, whatever, I think the city, I have experienced the city saying, how many parking spaces will that eliminate?
Yeah.
Well, a red curb or something like that. I think safety should come before
Thank you.
parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. Any other comments from the public? All right, are there any on Zoom? Yes, please.
We'll be bringing in Kaylin Weeks.
Okay. Mr. Weeks.
Good evening, Mayor Lowe, council members and staff. My name is Kaylin Weeks. I'm Policy Director at Generation Housing. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak on one of my favorite topics next to housing, and that is parking. The proposed plan is definitely a strong step in the right direction, but really, I would like to actually uplift some of Mr. Conlon's comments because they really kind of touch upon that of our own, especially as it relates to climate action. I mean, Sonoma County as a whole stands on pillars of climate action and equity for all. And one of the strongest things that we can do really to effectively address this would be to form a parking benefit district. Sure, are people going to have to pay into it? Absolutely. But the benefits that it will yield should actually be given stronger consideration. And while by no means do I expect you to hammer out those details today, I would simply ask that the council, empower staff to give greater consideration and to really investigate opportunities to potentially put into effect a parking benefit district inside the next year or two. It can be really beneficial, and we would love to support any effort on that we can, because at the end of the day, demand responsive pricing management of on and off street parking is really key to providing more convenient parking in a financially sustainable manner. And so, in addition to that, I'd just like to add a brief comment on, strong support for shared parking, expand that scope as much as possible. There's a lot of banks with a lot of parking in the downtown area. And certainly I would have to imagine at least one or two, even if they are a little bit troublesome, would be willing to cooperate and work with the community to offer up those spaces. Apps like Parkade are really revolutionizing how cities approach parking and can certainly play an integral role in reducing climate emissions by simply allowing people to reserve a space, thereby, avoid, driving around and around and around. And I'll spare you the lecture, but I would just say that this option would really deserve more rigorous exploration and investment. And then bike parking, as you all know, the lodge offers bikes for their guests. Only issue, where are they supposed to put them? Add more bike parking. Sonoma is designed perfectly to facilitate bicycle and pedestrian traffic towards the center of town, but we also need deeper investments in Class 4 bike lanes. Safety is important, and it doesn't need to be fancy. We can just do what Santa Rosa did on Armory Lane as a pilot to see if it works for you. So the point of all of this is solutions abound, and I would just really love to see City of Sonoma give greater consideration to really aggressive action on parking, because as Mr. Conlon noted, and as I think a lot of people know, BMT reduction is of paramount importance to a long-term sustainability of all our communities. So with that, thank you so much as always. Appreciate the chance to speak on this issue, and I look forward to hearing your discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Weeks. Any other comments on Zoom? No. All right. So at this point, we'll close public comment and bring this back to the council for possible action or amendments, etc. What is the will of the council at this point? Any comments on this? Ms. Farrar-Rivas, please.
I would like to make an amendment to follow up on the suggestions that were just made about sooner versus later, looking at the other aspects that we can do around parking that relate to reducing vehicle miles traveled. I support moving ahead with what we have now. I think it's a good step forward, and I think that it's important for us to move this ahead in a way that is responsive to what people from the public have said the needs are, what they see the needs are. But I think the other responsibility we have as a council is to think of the long-term needs and really how do we reducing vehicle miles traveled. So that I'm comfortable with this, with an amendment that in a specified period of time, because this phase 2, that looking at some of those options sooner versus in later. So that while we're assessing this current phase, we're already starting the next phase of what are some of the options of these recommendations we might be able to explore within the next, say within a year or two. Because I'm not exactly, and I know I don't remember just right now exactly what the timeline is for the first measure, or if there is a specific timeline for measure. Phase 1.
Phase 1. Thank you. Any other comments before we entertain a motion? Any comments? Mr. Wellander?
A question to the city staff. I know there has been chalking of tires, there's been circulation. Have we not been enforcing parking, and it's just been more of a having a person present, chalking tires, hoping that they'll respect that and move?
And, I can let the chief correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a reduction in parking enforcement during COVID. And as we came out of COVID, it was a slow start back up. But as of today, we are currently enforcing parking per the current 3-hour from, was it 8 to 5 through Saturday? Sorry, 9 to 5.
Thank you. At this point, no more comment.
Any other comments? Mr. Gurney, do you have any comments? No? I see you
Well,
tentatively.
unless I missed it in the staff report, I would like to think that there is a particular set time when we will come back with some kind of an evaluation of the impact of phase 1 strategies.
Is there? Mr. Somebody have an answer for that? Ms. Gates?
So there currently is no timeline to come back. That is something that City Council can make a recommendation around, because we are basically starting and you're giving us direction to just move forward at this point. So that we will be coming back as we move forward with these, because some of them still need to be evaluated. More studies need to be done around like the downtown circulator. So that will be coming back to you all. Things that cost more money obviously would come back to you for your approval. I wouldn't anticipate anything very quickly happening in the sense of seeing a change, but maybe a 5-year or 2 to 5.
Well, I think based on this conversation, what I'm hearing, that if there's a desire to look at more other measures, I think one of the things that we can do, and you heard the consultant talk about, there are other ways we can look at VMT reduction in our parking strategies that are suitable for a town like Sonoma versus San Francisco or even Santa Rosa, based on the transit availability and other options. So I think what we need to do is, hearing that if that's direction from council, is go back and look at what those strategies are, and maybe we can bring back some processes that we could do in parallel, because what you're going to see happen are some development measures that are going to be coming into play, general plan work that's being in play, the climate action group, a number of initiatives there that we're working on right now that touch on some of these items. They'll intersect. So what we can do is pull that together and bring back to council how we plan to address VMT reduction in our parking strategies in the short term, while we put some of these into place. Because changing hours, enforcing, wayfinding, those are things we can get going over this current year, and then we can report back potentially on a yearly basis on where we are with that.
I just wanted to clarify too, it's the idea behind the phase 1 and the parking management is all of this needs to work together, right? As we identified, we need places for the employees to go park longer term to be able to give them the option, right? So a lot of this is going to be in the works now that, if this is approved tonight, to provide that direction to move forward, and so that we can get everything working together. We could provide updates on like an annual basis where we're at with everything. But as far as redoing the recount of everything, I think it's beneficial to have more of those phase ones in place before paying to have another count done, if that makes sense. That's where I was going with 5 years, in the sense of giving us a couple of years, in the sense of getting the parking agreements done and things like that.
That's good.
I don't think it's good. I would suggest, I think it's too long a period of time for us to be, I think that things can happen parallel, and I'm fine moving ahead on all of these. But at the same time, I think that the urgency is now. 5 years from now, it's like we're not reaching our goals. We're seeing greater weather hazards. We are paying for it. It's costing us money. It's not just that, also I want everybody to be safe, but every single one of those tragedies costs money and will increase the pressure on Sonoma. I mean, the more tragedies that happen because of global warming, the more people that we have that want to move to Sonoma, right? Or want to come and, live here because there's no other place to go. So, I mean, I don't want to be, really, I mean, it is an urgent issue, and I think that we can't move in 5-year increments. I think that we have to be moving on these things now, so move all this ahead. But in the meantime, look at, because the other thing with the parking benefits district or something like that, bring money into the city so that we can be doing the other things to alleviate some of the other issues that we have in regards to housing. There's ways that you can work those out, and other cities are doing that, where some of those initiatives are going into housing funds. So that's what I would, I just want to see, and I know resources are limited, but I think that the research on what other cities are doing and what possible things could be explored could happen, could start happening in parallel. So that would be my recommendation, my amendment.
So what I'm hearing is that we just want, we don't want to wait 5 years before we have an update. And we'd like some of the strategies that affect reducing vehicle miles traveled to be implemented parallel and get a report back in sooner than 5 years. And I don't think we need to make that as an amendment. I think that's the direction, unless I'm hearing differently from staff.
No, we hear you, and I think the reduction of vehicle miles traveled is a broader topic than parking. I think
Yes.
that's something that we're looking at in a variety of ways, planning documents, working with the county, and on their efforts. So that is going to continue. That's going to move forward, and if part of those solutions bleed into parking strategies, we will definitely bring that forward based on this conversation. But that won't hold up some of these phase one implementations. And I think we're looking at VMT broader. I think that's the other thing too, is we need to look at it in terms of what network is, the alternative mode transportation mode study.
Trial demand and
that the county is currently working on, SCTA is working on, that we'll be participating in as well. So we'll probably get a lot more out of that, and ideas that we can bring back to the council and either implement or bring back as part of the 2024 budget. We can talk about the goal setting and try to get those implemented.
And of course, we have the SCTA new executive director here tomorrow. We'll try to talk to him about some of these situations, and hopefully he has some ideas. Just a couple comments. I know that I'm totally in favor of talking to the people that own these private lots. As Mr. Ding pointed out, people use them anyway, so perhaps there's something there. The other thing is many of them do have vehicle charging stations there, which we do not have on the plaza. And so, for example, at the community center, there are some in the Bank of America parking lot as well. So instead of us investing in putting in those facilities, the infrastructure, perhaps that's a priority for us. And it could be something also included in the signage for people. If you're driving a such and such vehicle, you want to charge it. It's a 3-minute walk from the community center, and there is a Tesla charging station there. I think that some of those could maybe go together. As much as I'd like to, I think eventually we're going to need some charging stations maybe closer to the plaza, but at the moment, if there are some around that we can sort of co-opt, if you will, through this other plan, I think that that's a good idea, that we should try that. I'm totally in favor of the circulator. I've been saying that for a very long time. I don't think it needs to be a bus. And I think that if buses are idling, such as described by Mr. Zimmerman, that they need to call immediately because that is a violation. And, noise violation as well as an emissions violation. And that should not be tolerated. I don't care what the situation is. So you need to report that so that we can deal with it. But I am in favor of a circulator. I think the fact that we have 2 pretty large hotels just south of town and 1 in the currently unincorporated part of the city, I think it would work well to bring people in, especially if they're coming in, they're wine tasting or going to some event. So I look forward to and many of those vehicles, by the way, are electric vehicles. And so it's a way of sort of doing. So I'd like to sort of see how some of these strategies can incorporate some of the concerns that were raised by Mr. Conlon and Ms. Farrar-Rivas. I think that there are ways to do it, that these are not separate buckets of things. These are things that can be done in a parallel fashion with our first phase. If there are no more comments, Mr. Wellander, and then we'll entertain a motion, perhaps?
Yeah,
Yes,
just
please.
a couple of comments. One is regarding the loading zones. I tend to agree with you, Madam Mayor, about whether or not there's a problem of loading. In fact, maybe this is just an odd way of saying this, and the traffic consultant can absolutely correct me. But that tends to slow vehicular circulation. And the circulation around the plaza should be slow. It's intended to be slow. And so I think we need to putz around the plaza.
Appropriate use of the Yiddish. Thank you, sir. Yes.
So just to chime in on that really quickly, yeah, you're absolutely right. Traffic around the plaza should be moving slowly from a safety perspective, but at the same time, and again, I also generally agree with you, this is not a major problem. This is not necessarily maybe deserving of a solution right now, and that's okay. But when you do have double parking sometimes, whether people are parking, you could be potentially blocking sight lines. So that can cause some safety issues sometimes. I just want to point that out, that sometimes it can cause safety.
Yes, and we heard some sightline issues reported on West Spain Street. And I think we'll thank you for bringing that to our attention, because that safety, that's the number one thing we have to do, is make sure people are safe. I agree with you. Yeah.
One other comment too is on the parking wayfinding. I think signage is great. I just want to exercise some discretion and taste, because I think we can get too much signage pollution, and I would not support that in a charming little town called Sonoma.
I knew you were going to say that, and I knew you were going to say that, and thank you for saying it. But I think it's a great idea, because if people knew that you could park at Arnold Field and it was literally a 2-minute walk, they may park there. And if they could park there all day and not risk a ticket and have a 2-minute walk, then, there's that. So, I think that there's some good ways to do it.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion on this, or are we still discussing? What do we need?
I will make a motion to adopt the resolution attached to this packet, accepting the downtown parking management plan and implementing phase 1.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Mr. Ding. Any questions regarding the motion? Seeing none, clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you. And just remember, we're going to enforce parking. So, moving on, we have item 9.2, the creation of a general plan update task force. And this seems to be your evening, Ms. Gates.
It is. All right, good evening again. So last but not least before you tonight is the creation of the General Plan Update Task Force. So on May 17th, the City Council approved a contract with De Novo Planning Group to help prepare this General Plan update that we are starting very shortly. As part of the process, City Council requested the city create a General Plan Update Task Force or committee to provide diverse perspectives. So the task force will act as an advisory capacity with input and suggestions documented and presented to decision-making bodies such as the Planning Commission and City Council. The meetings of the task force will be open to the public and held under the Brown Act. Staff is recommending that the task force be comprised of 7 members, 5 of which would be residents of Sonoma City and 2 of residents of the Sonoma Valley, which is surrounding our city limits, with the idea being that these members would have a diverse professional background, expertise, or education, as well as demographics, age, etc. And that they would be related to the topics discussed in the general plan, such as transportation, parks and recreation, land use, cultural resources. Each city council member would provide staff with 2 potential candidates that represent the city and 1 potential candidate that represents the Sonoma Valley. The purpose of the membership, duties, etc. are outlined in the resolution that was attached to the staff report. And at your seat, there is a modified resolution with suggestions from the city attorney that include the following clarifications. 1, identifies that the Valley resident is defined by our existing city policy, which is our school district. That the vacancies would be filled in compliance with our existing policy. We're recognizing that this is a 2-year process, and during that time, there may be individuals that need to step off. And lastly, that the task force is automatically disestablished upon the adoption of the general plan, so that we wouldn't need to go through another process. Staff is recommending that City Council take 2 actions tonight. The first is to adopt the resolution as amended by the city attorney, approving the creation of the General Plan Update Task Force. And second, to appoint 2 members of the City Council to work with staff to finalize the task force membership, which will be brought back to City Council for final approval. And with that, staff concludes their presentation and is available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions of staff on these items? Any questions regarding? Okay. Any questions from the public or comments from the public regarding this? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to bring it back. I'd like to make a suggestion, and that the vice mayor and I serve as 2 people to sort of shepherd this beginning of this process, if he's willing to serve with me, if everyone agrees. And then, of course, we'll follow the process of people submitting the names and so forth. But we need 2 people to kick this off.
Okay, I'm happy to do that, but if there's another council member that has a burning desire to do this, I'm willing to let that be.
Not seeing
Our
any.
support. I'm not a burning.
No one's burning here, okay? And the fire chief isn't here, so that's not good. Okay, well, thank you for that, and very nice of you to say that. So knowing that, we have 2 things that we would need motions on, as I understand it. The first would be the resolution as amended and before us. So I would take a motion to approve that.
Can I ask for
Sure, please.
one slight change in the requirements of what we're looking for, the background of the participants in this task member? It says, when it says and/or environmental justice, I think it should say and/or environment and environmental justice, because those are 2 different things. Environmental justice is one area of expertise, focused primarily on DEI. Expertise on the environment is another area of expertise. And so I think that just by adding that one other word, environment and environmental justice, would make it so that we would be clearer, because I think as you can imagine, I think it's very important that we have somebody.
Remember, you have two people too you can nominate.
Yes.
Yes. So if you're making a motion with those amendments, please.
Yeah, I would
say.
move to accept this this description of the task force with the amendment that we add in just the word environment before it says environment and environmental justice.
Okay. With those amendments, do we have a second?
Second.
There's a second.
To clarify the motion, is this a motion to adopt this resolution?
Yes,
with
it's
this
adopt the
amendment?
resolution.
With the amendment, yeah.
With the clarification on environment and environmental
Yeah.
justice.
Take public
I'll get
comment
my
yet on
legal
this?
Ds down later.
We have taken public comment, yes. Okay, all right. Seeing no further questions, will clerk call the roll on this first item? Yes, there was.
Ron.
It was actually me.
It was the vice mayor.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was making the correction on the resolution.
All right, very good.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right, and on the second point, we need a motion to accept the mayor and the vice mayor to work with staff to finalize the task force membership.
I will move to accept the mayor and the vice mayor to be the ad hoc committee to finalize the task force.
Okay? is
I
there-
second.
And there's a second. Any questions? Okay,
And congratulations.
clerk will call the roll, please.
Councilmember Farrar-Rivas,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gurney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wellander,
Yes.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Lowe.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries
Thank
unanimously.
you. Thank you, everyone. I think it's going to be a wonderful process. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Vice Mayor. All right, we are on to commission and committee rosters. We took some action during the consent calendar to fulfill some of the roles on those commissions. Anything else to report on those from the clerk?
No, only that we do have the two positions on the Sonoma Citizens Advisory Commission, and that we are accepting applications and we'll be soon getting those filled.
And one position is a commissioner and the other is an alternate. So.
Okay, great. Question? Yes.
Yeah, just for information on that agenda item, the link doesn't come up, at least on my package. So, do you know what I'm referring to? There's a link, commission and committee roster.
The
Right.
roster isn't linked.
When you go to the link, does it just have like a blank? You have to wait a minute or you have to hit download. For some reason that, I don't know if it's the size of the document. I'll look into that and see if we can.
Yeah, if it's a hyperlink, it shouldn't need to be downloaded, so we can look at that for future. Thank you for noticing that. I appreciate it. I like all links to work. That's one of the things drives me crazy. When you hit something, I had that happen to me today, and it was like immediately called up. Do you know your hyperlinks aren't working? Okay. If there's no other business before us, I believe at 8 o'clock we are adjourned. Thank you so much.